Well, I feel like I'm starting this show a little bit like I started this show last week with just a groan, just frustration. 0-2. You feel like at some point you get a chance to reset the season if you can beat the Chargers, and you don't even compete, Jack. I mean, it's rough out here in Charlotte right now.
Yeah.
Especially the football scene.
Oh, yeah. I mean, probably one of the worst times for Panthers fans since I'd say since last year, the 1-16 season, back in 2010, and then even again maybe in like 2000, I think it was 5. It's bad all the way around, and it doesn't seem to be getting better.
Yeah, and Panthers fans are sounding off. While we're at it, welcome into the Keep Prowling podcast. I'm your host, DJ Beal. Got Jack Taylor over here with me, and I decided to slip myself into some of the spaces just to listen to the fan. I want to hear the fan base. I want to hear what they're talking about. I want to hear what's going on. Of course, I hear it in the comments. I put up the post about, of course, the running joke for over the past week has been how cheap Panthers tickets have been.
Yeah.
So I put the post out there like, would you, rather get a stadium hot dog or would you rather go to a Panthers game right now? Because right now it's a little rough. And now, that was before week 2.
Yeah.
And now after week 2, and of course we got the big news. Let's just start there before we even get into the game. And I'm sure it'll, the conversations will connect. But Bryce Young being benched. How do you feel about it? Because I mean, I think both of us have been pretty high on Bryce Young since he was drafted. I think, and it's funny, I was talking to Jeff last week, and it's amazing what a year can do. You think about it. This time last year, there was a lot. You were 0-2, but there was still a lot of excitement because you're still finding. This team was still finding itself at that time. You got a new coach. Weird, you're in the same position this year. You got a new quarterback. Still similar position. You got new weapons, similar position, and it's kind of more of the same. How do you feel about the fact that they benched Bryce this quickly?
Yeah, so it's funny because you talk about being in the same position. I mean, last year to the day almost, it was September 22nd, and it'll be September 24th last year. It'll be September 22nd when this week's game comes around. And last year, Bryce had a quote-unquote ankle injury that was kind of speculated and kind of doubted by a lot of people around. So he didn't play that game. Andy Dalton came in to play against the Seahawks. Yeah. And so, they lost the game by 10 but scored 27 points in that game, and then Bryce Young was in the next week. So it just seems very reminiscent of that situation, which leads me to doubt whether or not it was Dave Canales' decision, as he expressed, because he was very adamant in the post-game press conference, literally less than 24 hours later, saying that, or beforehand, saying that Bryce was the guy, like he said it multiple times. And it was very interesting then to see that turnaround, and if you believe the reports that, coming out where Bryce was shocked about, the move being made. It's just hard to believe that was coming from, Dave Canales alone or was led by him, especially knowing how, prolific he is at trying to resurrect quarterbacks in Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield. So it seems unlikely to me that he would give up on a quarterback so fast. Yeah. And to me, I don't know, it seems like kind of a chicken and egg situation because I can't tell if Canales just doesn't trust Bryce or Bryce is just performing that poorly, because to me, the play calls have seemed dry and lackluster and not allowing Bryce to, get into a rhythm. And unfortunately then when he is then given the opportunity to make a play, he's forcing the ball, he's putting it in positions that he shouldn't be putting it in and killing momentum. So for me, I don't know, I think it's kind of like putting just a Band-Aid on a leak in your house. Like I really don't think, I do think he's not playing to the standard that we have wanted and we have expected. And I was one of the biggest proponents of if C.J. Stroud were in this position, if Anthony Richardson were in this position, if Caleb Williams in this position, it would be the exact same. Yeah. So I think that putting Andy Dalton in, I mean, obviously he's going to have, you have a veteran in there. You're going to be able to move the ball better than you were. Like you looked at it last year. And in the last 2 games that Bryce Young has played this season, he has thrown the ball 31 times. He's completed 31 passes out of 56 receptions for 389 yards, no touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. In that game against the Seahawks last year, Dalton was 34 for 58 in that single game.
Yeah.
He threw for 361 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions.
Yeah.
So there will clearly be a difference. I think just it'll be interesting to see how long it lasts, how big the difference is, and whether or not, they believe. Because Canales was saying, like, this isn't a situation where, like, we need to rush where this team is at. But putting Andy Dalton in at this moment, to me, says that they believe, or someone in the organization believes, they have the ability to win right now and make a postseason push,
or panic or something going on.
Or else you don't do that.
Yeah, I think, I have a lot to respond to based off of what you said. But I think the first thing, you mentioned was Dave Canales' decision. And was it his decision? Was it impacted by other decisions that have been made, maybe not this year, but in the past years, about other coaches that just happen to be wearing the blue that we know and love? But I think the real blame here is Dave Tepper. I have not been big on putting all the blame on Dave Tepper, but this decision, yes, Bryce Young hasn't played well. Right? Has anybody? I don't know if I've seen anybody on this team play well.
That's the rub.
And I think because I feel like there's got to be at least a little bit of nervousness from Dave Canales, first-year head coach, first time ever being a head coach, right? You're 0-2. You're in a similar situation to the guy who got fired last year who was a first-year head coach. That didn't save his job. So because of that, there's got to be a little bit of nervousness. There's got to be a little bit of looking over your shoulder as a coach saying, I don't know how long I got, and I got to make a decision to at least get us a win here, at least maybe even get us to 500 and then reassess the Bryce Young situation. I think there's a lot of panic within the fan base because I think they see more of the same. But, I mean, to put it square, I know all the pressure and all the praise goes on the quarterback's shoulders, but – I mean, nothing's been, like you said, you mentioned the play calling. Where are the easy throws? Where is the get it to Xavier Legette and let him, make some yards after the catch? Where is it getting to Deontay Johnson underneath and letting him get yards after the catch? Where is it, where's the intermediate throws to Adam Thielen to make it easier on himself? And the running game isn't great to begin with either. Now, I felt like Chuba Hubbard had a pretty good game, in spurts last week, but if I'm not worried about Chuba Hubbard as a defensive coordinator, you know who I'm going to put all my eyes on? Bryce Young. And a lot of people have asked me, like, what's the fix? Like, because people want to make this apples and apples, which it's not. Comparison of the Texans, right? Comparison of Anthony Richardson and how he's played and whatnot. People want to make these comparisons, but the problem is, number one, those teams were much more talented. You got the Texans having back-to-back first-round picks, right? You gave up a haul just to get Bryce Young to begin with. So you deconstructed the team in hopes of getting them one overall pick at the beginning anyway. And, like, right now, the way this team is played, the way the offensive line has been in the past as well, you'd almost have to have a Josh Allen or have to have a Lamar that can Band-Aid, you talked about Band-Aid the offensive line a little bit to begin with. And Bryce is not necessarily that guy. Now, I will say Bryce has missed some of the throws that typically we're used to seeing him make. But I think, in watching some of the film too, it feels like Bryce Young has been a little panicked himself, right? He's been playing a little toesy. He's been playing he's been a little antsy a little bit, right? Like even some of the throws, we see him make these off-schedule throws last year. We saw him make throws on the run, but it feels like he may not have been set, but he was lined up. And I feel like sometimes this year it feels like he wasn't even lined up. He was just, on hoping God-given arm talent would just get him there. And I think that's another problem too. And, that goes back to coaching as well. You got a young guy in his second season. That goes back to Dave Canales, who's supposed to be this, QB whisperer, right? That goes back to him saying, all right, Bryce, this is what – and I hope that these couple of weeks that Andy Dalton gets a chance to start – will show Bryce not only what Andy Dalton, Andy Dalton is a traditional guy, right? He's a traditional quarterback. But I think it'll also be a good opportunity to show Bryce some of the film, even just from last year, where he was completing, we were seeing him complete these passes and say, like, okay, this is your problem. Go back and reset it. It's fine. I think the struggle sometimes with benching quarterbacks, especially early, is like, confidence, right? That's the biggest question. The biggest question is, has Bryce lost his confidence? Has he lost the locker room? This, that, and the third. You're 0-2. You're starting similar to last year. You're seeing other quarterbacks play well throughout the league, even though, if we can be honest, there hasn't been a lot of quarterbacks this season playing well to begin with. None of the quarterbacks that you can think of that, come to mind when you compare to Bryce Young have been playing well either way. So it's like, it's too early to give up. I think it's too early to give up on Bryce, and you gave up too much to give up on Bryce. I think I would love to see a little bit of confidence. I know Andy Dalton's excited to play, but I would love to see a little bit of confidence from Dave Canales, because he's going to be asked, right? He's going to be asked, what about Bryce? What are you doing with Bryce? What's the Bryce situation? Just get on the podium, show your utmost confidence on that guy. We're working with him. We hope he'll get a chance to start again. We're going to see how Andy plays. Like, you can be real and say we're going to see how Andy plays. But at the same time, Bryce is our quarterback.
Yeah, and that's where, like, I even asked that to Canales yesterday, where I was like, how do you make sure he doesn't get lost in the weeds in all of this? And what do you do to kind of help him along while he's on the bench? And it was kind of a skirt-around answer. We focused a little bit more on how Andy, was going to be getting more of the number one reps, and they're going to be, reworking how they practice. But then it was just kind of like, when asked about it again, he was just like, I expect, as long as Bryce comes out, plays, does an NFL standard. He learns from this. He works hard. He doesn't act like anything's changed for him. So, but that to me is like, all right, well, it sounds like you're shifting focus away from him, which I think is the last thing that you want to do. Mm-hmm. I mean, the whole reason I think that it was drawn to bring Canales here was, like we said, his quarterback guru, facilities that he brought, and so that's where I'm a bit concerned, and that's where it also to me seems like, because Canales, like Bryce Young has the locker room, and he has the support, and you heard it in the players' voices in the ones who spoke yesterday, where they felt just guilty about all of it. They were like, we didn't play to our best to allow him to show his best. Mm-hmm. I think you talk about it being antsy. I think he absolutely is. Well, I think the interior of the line has been developed very well. I still think, and defensive coordinators have seen it and they plan to it. Icky is still a problem. Mm-hmm. If he's not letting up pressure, he's getting penalties. He's holding. He's doing, and Icky has become a liability. And you hate to say it because he's a hometown kid, the first lineman we've drafted in a long time, and the fans were clamoring for a lineman to be drafted. Yep. But you just see where the pressure comes from. Joey Bosa ran all over him. Mm-hmm. Cameron Jordan ran all over him. Yeah. And you're going to continue to, Max Crosby's coming into town. We're going to go see Max Crosby next week. It's not going to get any easier with these teams we're playing. And so I think, it's going to be the same situation. So I think Bryce absolutely is antsy out there because he's never been hit like this before. He was never hit like this at Alabama. Yeah. He could run around like a kid in the backyard because he knew he had the freedom to do so without the fear of getting blindsided. Here he doesn't have that. And so I think that's why you see him forcing those plays. It's like Cam towards the end of his tenure. He knew there was no one else that was making plays, so he had to be the guy.
Hero ball.
And so I think you see a lot of that in Bryce, and he's even mentioned it, like getting greedy, trying to force the ball to continue the momentum because he doesn't know when he's going to get another chance. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that Bryce was the main problem, and I think it's kind of scapegoating to take care of it like that. Because you talk about, those check down routes were non-existent, and if they were to the running back, to guys that we didn't need it to, like that they were last year, that we didn't need to be. And so that's where I'm a bit concerned because Canales is the one calling the plays. Izzik is there, but in my mind, it's not a solution it's not going to be a solution to replace Bryce, in my mind. I think the problem is much larger scale, and I think the only way this team improves is to continue to distance itself from any sort of decisions made by Scott Fitterer. Yeah. You talk about wasting, dumping all of your resources, not wasting per se, but dumping all of your resources into getting Bryce Young, the guy that the coach at the time, if you want to believe the reports, didn't even want. And whether or not he would have done any better here is neither here nor there, but at the end of the day, at least that guy has the NFL size. Bryce's size, I think, is starting to show its issues because of the fact that he's been getting hit so much that it's causing him to be a bit more, just concerned about his health when he's out there. And so if you had taken C.J. Stroud or Anthony Richardson, Anthony Richardson probably wouldn't be healthy, but C.J. Stroud, or at least their sizes would allow for you to not be so concerned.
And Caleb Williams hasn't played well either.
Caleb Williams has played He's played horribly. He's played horribly. They have, they're 1-1, and he didn't.
And we talk about the talent on that team. I mean, comparatively, it's not even close.
No, not even close at all. And so he did absolutely nothing in the Titans win. I mean, he had a passer rating of 55.
Yeah.
He did literally nothing in that game. And then you look at the last game against, I want to say it was the oh darn, I can't remember who exactly they played.
I'm looking on to in week 1.
No, week 2 with Titans was week 1, and he did nothing.
Yeah.
Week 2, I think they lost week 2. I can't remember to who, but regardless, he did nothing. He did absolutely nothing. So I have no real issues with like the assets we gave up to allow for him to get drafted, because if he was on the team right now, it would be horrible.
Yeah.
Maybe you could have drafted defensive end, with that second pick or that that first pick, but like it's not a one player issue on this team.
Yeah.
I think defensively the depth is an issue. Not having DJ Wanham on the field right now is killing them, because Jadeveon Clowney can't be your number one guy. I don't know what happened to like guys like Marquise Haynes. They never brought him back. Losing the guys we lost, and Frankie Louvu has hurt us.
Yeah.
Has hurt the team. I mean, even Yetur Gross-Matos, he was starting to show signs of actual progression last year, and to not get him back, I think, is definitely hurt, because the pass rush is non-existent. Derek Brown's absence was greatly felt.
Yeah.
Because you knew that was going to happen, because J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards they were going to run all over us, and you'll see the same thing with Zamir White. When you go to the Raiders, I mean, the running backs you're going to have to face in this season it's not great. Yeah. So I think something should be being done right now by Dan Morgan to get a defensive tackle in there, because A'Shawn Robinson and Shai Tuttle were supposed to be complementary to Derek Brown. I don't think they're enough to lead the charge, especially with the linebackers they have behind them.
Yeah, and do you think Dan Morgan can be aggressive enough to find that guy? Because I think that's going to be the struggle, is like if you feel like you're in some sort of a win now mode, right? Because the thought is you go to Andy Dalton, you hope he wins some games. My thought is I don't think you're necessarily in a win now mode. I think you're in you go to Andy Dalton to pick yourself back up, and then I think you go back to Bryce. I mean, you can't sit here and tell me that Andy Dalton at 38 is more talented than a second-year Bryce Young.
And if you want to really be cheeky about it, Andy Dalton was in the same draft class as Cam Newton, so
yeah, that's true.
If one's good for the goose, why isn't it good for the gander? But that's neither here nor there. I just would love to see Cam back in a uniform, and I'm hoping the Dolphins are thinking about calling him up, because I don't even know who their backup is, but it can't be the guy.
Yeah.
But regardless, I completely agree with you. And not even 38-year-old Andy Dalton, if you're in a win now mode, why are you starting a 34-year-old wide receiver in Adam Thielen and then a 31-year-old cornerback in Mike Jackson? That doesn't sound like a win now mode to me.
Yeah,
that doesn't, or it also doesn't sound like a rebuild mode to me. Now, it doesn't fit either mold there to start those kind of guys in those key positions. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, Mike Jackson has done incredibly well, I think, for what we've asked of him. To be that second guy, because we didn't really know who it was going to be, and you were terrified regardless, because Troy Hill's not, a second cornerback. Yeah. Even Chau Smith-Wade at that age is not, where he needs to be. So I think that he's come in, and because once Dane Jackson went down, you're like, all right, well, now what are we going to do? Yeah. And so I don't know how aggressive Dan Morgan's going to be, because say what you will about like Scott Fitterer and Matt Rule, they would throw in a lot of Temple guys, a lot of, Baylor guys. But if you look at a lot of the acquisitions that Dan Morgan made, I mean, Damian Lewis from Seattle, Mike Jackson from Seattle, Jordan Fuller, Dane Jackson, both from Buffalo, organizations that he was a part of, in the last few years. So he was kind of picking from, guys that he knew of and guys that were in their system, even A'Shawn Robinson with, Ejiro Evero in Denver. So I don't know how aggressive they get, like, to look at some defensive tackles around the league. Like, guys like Javon Kinlaw, Danico Autry come to mind that they could go for, that could maybe fill that hole for you while Derek Brown's out. I mean, because to me, that was before even Bryce Young got benched. Once Derek Brown went down, I'm like, all right, well, that's pretty much your season. I mean, the defense did as well as it could without Shaq Thompson last year. Yeah. But, I mean, Derek Brown, there was a reason why he was, setting, Hall of Fame records. And you could say it's because, well, there was no, they had to run through him because they're running away from Brian Burns. But regardless, he still plugs up the hole. Yeah. And so I think that that's an issue that, like, there's, no matter what you really do on the offense, in my mind, this offense isn't built like you saw the prime example would be the Seattle game last year.
Mm-hmm.
In the Seattle game last year, Kenneth Walker was a rookie. We didn't know what was how he was going to look.
Yeah.
They still had DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, all that kind of Geno wasn't sure where Geno was at as a quarterback. And so the offense put up 27 points. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter. Seattle puts up 37.
Yeah.
And so as good as while it would satiate the fans a little bit to at least score some points, because that was my expectations. That was my hope for the year. I didn't even really care if we won that many games, to be honest, because I was not expecting the team to do so. Mm-hmm. I just wanted the team to show a competent offense that can score points.
Yeah.
So I think you're gonna get that, but be careful what you wish for, because that doesn't mean that the defense is going to be able to stop these offenses. Now the Raiders is a better sample size, but they also just whooped up on the Ravens.
They did.
So, sorry.
They did.
I mean, whooped is a strong word. I mean, it was a close game, but if the Ravens can't
put points up,
if the Ravens defense can't stop them, regardless of losing Clowney, Patrick Queen, what have you, they still have Roquan Smith. They still got guys on that front seven to stop the run, stop the pass, and they couldn't stop the Raiders. Yeah. And the Raiders got whooped on by the Chargers. So if you do community property of football, like you say it's a good sample size, but you don't really know, especially in Las Vegas as well.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely a tough situation, and like you said, with Max Crosby too. I mean, he's been wreaking havoc the first 2 weeks. I mean, as he's done throughout his whole career.
Yeah.
And honestly, they could probably move him around and exploit the mismatch with Icky, to be honest.
And they will.
He usually rushes off the other side, but he doesn't have to.
No.
I mean, if you see it and. The Raiders saw a mismatch against the Ravens with Faalele going up against him. So it's just one of those things, and a backup in Patrick McCarry. So the Raiders, especially that coaching staff, they're a defensive-minded coaching staff. Mm-hmm. They know how to make you uncomfortable. And
I think that's going to be where you kind of got to pass with the last two coaches they played, because Dennis Allen, came from the San Francisco coaching tree, had the dynamic kind of coaching mindset that you're like, all right, it makes sense if Canales got outcoached. Then Jim Harbaugh. I mean, that was you're not going to outcoach Jim Harbaugh. It doesn't matter who you are. Yeah. So this is Anthony Pierce. He's another young guy, who people were questioning whether or not he should have been given that role to begin with. So it's going to be kind of, an eye-opener if you get out-coached by another young guy who wasn't really looked at. Then I think the questions will start to trickle around to you. And I don't think that, I haven't lost confidence in Canales per se. I do think, because to be honest, and the key thing for me was last year in the preseason, Frank Reich kept saying, we're keeping our weapons close to our hip. We're not going to show a whole lot in the preseason, but they didn't show anything. Not a thing. Yeah. At least for Canales, once the starters got in, you're like, oh, okay, consistent drive, competent play calling, able to move the ball downfield. Yeah. Then once the season started, it was like the lights went out immediately, and he forgot what he was doing, the entirety of his time frame. Yeah. And so part of me is concerned that, he's kind of lost his confidence in himself. And then you get questions about Dan Morgan because, all right, nobody else was talking to Dave Canales. No one else was looking at him. You clearly had a connection with him in Seattle. The offices right next to each other. So then are you just going off of the grapevine of the people you know, and then did we put the wrong GM in the position? Because you can say what you want about a head coach and about an owner, but the GM has a huge impact on your organization, as you've seen in different teams around the past and ours as well. I mean, Fitterer, I think, set this organization back a good decade with a lot of decisions he made. And so everything that's being done now is just trying to, recover from that. Yeah. And so I think we'll see going forward.
Yeah, and I think too, another thing that's being seen, and a guy who I think was a surprising cut when he was cut was Amir Smith-Marset.
Yeah.
I think the lack of speed on this team.
Yeah.
And some of it is play calling. They're not getting the ball to Xavier Gettin. I don't know what the yards after catch numbers are for the Panthers, but they have to be bottom of the league, if not 31 or 32.
Absolutely.
But that's another part of it too. Is there's no yards after catch. There's no big plays. There's no screens that turn into big plays. There's none of that. And it's where is that? And Smith-Marset was a guy who I was at least expecting to come in. He's probably not going to be a 1,000-yard guy, but a guy who can make big plays. We literally saw it last year.
Yeah.
He got in the game, the offense looked completely different because there was an element of speed that you had to respect.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that I felt like was missing. I felt like Deontay Johnson was fast enough, but I don't know if we've seen enough of him in space to know. Another guy I was hoping that they would grab. Now hindsight is 2020, and he's out for the season now. But Hollywood Brown was another guy I was hoping, like, just with this, give yourself some speed so these other intermediate guys can work.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's another thing the Panthers are lacking is speed, or at least we haven't seen it, and which still means you're lacking speed.
Yeah, and that's where, like, and he said the thing that Canales had said, in the offseason, what they were trying to do, it was like it's like 3.7 seconds was like the NFL average for time in the pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was like trying to work to that, running drills, running plays in practice to where he's like, I want Bryce to only need like 3.5 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, you bring in Deontay Johnson to have one of the fastest breakouts, one of the fastest route running abilities, and you don't put him in those positions. Xavier Legette has seen the field very minimally, and for a guy that you trade up into the first round to get, who you wanted to be your marquee guy, and has seen very little time on the field, and to where the fact of the matter where Adam Thielen is still one of your main targets, or now the running backs are, because even then Tommy Tremble comes back, and we knew he was going to be more of a blocking tight end, but even Jatavion Sanders, for what they wanted from him, has seen very little action, and it's just like none of the plays that he's calling. Like, because those screens you talk about are only coming at 3rd and 15, second and long, time frames where nobody wants to see a screen at that point in time. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I'll give him Canal some credit because last year, in situations like New Orleans or last week, Frank Reich would have just sat down. He would have just ran the ball up the middle, eat the clock, and then be done with it. But Canales, tried to score, and he did end up scoring, which was crazily enough. I don't know if you and Jeff talked about it. That was Bryce Young's first rushing touchdown.
Oh, wow.
Ever.
No, I didn't.
In his
I
NFL career.
That's crazy.
To just show you how ridiculous last season was.
Yeah.
And the stat threw me off when I saw it, too.
It was a nice juke, too.
It was a nice juke, but,
Justin Herbert tried to recreate it the next week.
He did. But regardless, like, the play calls that are being called are not to the strengths of the receivers that you have and the guys that you brought in specifically. You're not getting, Deontay in the middle because he's got the speed, but not for an end around,
Yeah.
That's where I agree with you. Amir had I understood why TMJ got cut. That made sense to me because the skill set he possessed, we had in triplicate and in better in Jonathan Mingo and Xavier Legette, those high balls, those red zone threats. We knew we had that. We didn't need him. With Amir, Adam Thielen and Deontay have the speed that they need, in route running abilities to go across the middle, those shallow routes, and make people miss. And then, but when you talk about, the dynamic kind of Deebo Samuel plays, end arounds, kind of those jet passes, you didn't have anybody like that. On the roster right now, Jalen Coker, the undrafted, wideout who's on the practice squad, he was probably the only guy that possessed that same kind of skill set, but he's not being obviously going to be given those reps. So Amir, I thought, what he didn't necessarily show a whole lot enough in preseason, but I don't think anybody showed anything in preseason to warrant getting cut or not.
Yeah. Do you think that's another problem too? That the starters didn't play in preseason, or do you think it's water under the bridge? I struggle with that because with a 2-15 team coming in from last year, and you got new weapons, you got new guys. You want to build that chemistry with in-game reps. Now, albeit, do you want to get anybody injured? That's the other, that's the devil's advocate of that. Do you want to get anybody injured? But I mean, the Chiefs played their guys.
Yeah, they were playing their guys, and it was like backyard football out there. I think that it kind of speaks to something that that Tom Brady had said a couple weeks ago, where like it goes even further, like into colleges, and the way that the NFL set up for practices in the offseason too. No more two-a-days. They're limiting practice times in college. They're not getting the same kind of practices they were, the same kind of development they were. Yeah. And so I think it's having a real hindrance on these younger guys, specifically in the quarterback position and in these skill positions, where it's not just about, it's not just about instinct or about technique. You still have to have the physicality to do this and the burst. And I think guys are losing their steps. And I think that definitely applies to, like Bryce Young and some of the starters. So I do think in that regard, maybe he should have played them, at least a drive each week. At the very least, in my mind, I thought the offensive line should have gotten reps each week in preseason because they're new. You have to develop that chemistry. And so whether Bryce gets a drive with them, like, J.C. Horn, Shaq, no, keep them off the field. Like Xavier Legette, guys that we were a little concerned about that we don't need to see anything from, keep them off the field. But, like, I think for Bryce's confidence, I think it would have, because I think he's still feeling the ghosts of last year, and it's still fresh in his mind. And so I think he needed that, reassurance to go, hey, this isn't the same team. I'm not going to get whooped on the same, which is untrue because he has been. But we've also played, and I think maybe that could be where the conservatism has come from, the play calling, just because of the defenses that you've been playing. But you have to be able to outcoach the front sevens you're playing against. Now, the Saints have one of the best front sevens in the NFL, and the Chargers weren't that far behind with Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, Denzel Perryman. Even guys like, former Panthers like Morgan Fox were getting in there and causing chaos. And so maybe as the front sevens we're going up against start to dwindle a little bit, maybe he gets a bit more dynamic. But what's going to really be telling is how he calls this game with Andy Dalton as opposed to Bryce Young. If because you can say what you will about a veteran presence, a veteran confidence, but if you're seeing more of the ball pushed downfield, if you're seeing more dynamic passes or dynamic play calls, then it's going to go, okay, you then just as a coach did not trust Bryce Young, and that's then your own fault because you're either not doing what you need to do as a coach to get him to a place where you can trust him, or you're giving up on the guy before even giving him a chance, and that's going to be damning either way. So it'll be interesting to see how he comes out and calls this game, and I think that's going to be really the most telling part about it, whether they win or not.
Yeah. How do you feel like? What's the blueprint for the Panthers to win against the Raiders? Double team Max Crosby and get the ball out quick.
Yeah, I think getting the ball out quick. I don't think you need to throw 58 passes in the game like they did last year against Seattle. But I think that I think Chuba has developed into what he was drafted to be. And so I think giving him more trust. And honest to God, I also have liked what I've seen from Miles Sanders this year. Last year, a lot of those runs that he would have gotten hit the first time in the backfield, he would have gone down. Whereas this year, he is running through the whistle and running differently than he was last year. I think he's healthy now. The groin injury is subsided to the point where he is back at full throttle. Yeah. So, open up the offense. Some play action passes, some spread guys around and give them the ability to get the defense on their heels. I think that's your key, is to get the defense on their heels, because right now defenses are looking at us going, all right, or looking at the Panthers going, it's like it's an easy out. Move your outfielders up to the diamond because it ain't gonna matter. They're not gonna swing for the fences. They're just gonna be conservative. They're gonna run it up the middle and they're not gonna do anything else. They're gonna throw a short check down pass for 3rd and long. So the defenses are resting against the Panthers right now. So if you want to win the game, call a dynamic offense, keep them on their heels, and look like the play caller that you were in Seattle and in Tampa Bay.
And I think too, for Panthers fans out there, as you like the video, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. I feel like don't be surprised if there is a different game plan for Andy Dalton. Not only just because of the way he plays, but typically when the backup comes in, for whatever reason, game plans start to change. I don't know if it's a lack of trust. I don't know if it's you feel like you got a little more of this guy's skill set that fits with this type of offense, or you're just throwing paint at the wall, and it just happens to be when the backup's in. Because, I've seen it firsthand with Lamar Jackson and Tyler Huntley when Greg Roman was the coach. Greg Roman would throw a couple of different passes from the vault out that you're like, wait a minute, where'd that come from? And I think, don't be surprised, but I think at the same time, if Canellis is able to call a good game for Dalton, he should be able to call a good game for.
And that's the key. And I think you're right. When the backup comes in, I think there's less of a. You hate to say it because it's a person's job and livelihood, but I think there's less of a desire to protect him. You're not as scared of putting the quarterback in compromising situations. On purpose. And so because you're like, all right, if he goes out for the year, it's just the backup quarterback. He's not the, he's not the solution. But you're also seeing an NFL now where backup quarterbacks are able to come in and do just as good, if not better, in certain respects. I mean, you looked at Joe Flacco with the Browns last year.
Yeah.
I mean, even looking at now with Sam Darnold on the Vikings is undefeated. Mm-hmm. Malik Willis, came in and didn't miss a beat for the Packers.
Yeah.
And so I think that it would not surprise me, and that was where I was confused as to last year as to why they didn't try to shop Andy Dalton off, because there was a lot of teams in need of quarterbacks last year. Even Brock Purdy needed a team, and it was funny to see Sam Darnold call out, the 49ers for cutting him and then whoop on him. Yeah. But also look at the system that he's got. I'm not surprised that he's doing that. And so there was even the sign over at at Dilworth Grill, like Darnold 2-0 to start the year, Mayfield 2-0 to start the year, Matt Rule 3-0 to start the year,
yeah,
Bryce Young 0-2. But I also think that that's kind of short-sighted because, like I said, I don't think it's been Bryce Young losing these games. And Bryce Young was the first to say, I'm the one with the ball. It is, my fault. Mm-hmm. But you'll hear every other player, the coaches were saying, Canales was saying, and that's what's so crazy because Canales was saying, this is an everybody issue. Yeah. We are all failing fundamentally with communication, with execution. Everybody is dropping the ball.
Yeah.
And so, it's a kind of, double-edged sword of, when things are going great, you put it all on the quarterback. When things are going terrible, you put it all on the quarterback. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's the situation right now. And to be honest, I don't really know. Like I said, I don't think there's one player or one group of players that can affect the game differently for the Panthers. I think the linebackers have to be addressed. I think Avero has made his own bed. You bring Josie Jewell in, who was a system guy for you. You said it would work out really well. I've seen nothing from him. Dan Morgan, you don't pay Frankie Louvu. I get he was asking for a lot of money, but it's not like Hassan Reddick, who it wasn't worth it. Now that we clearly see Frankie was worth it. Jeremy Chin, you can say what you will, he wasn't using that system at all. I mean, right now, Iku Leota is one of your best rushers right now, and you're obviously, like I said, struggling to fill the hole of Derek Brown. This is what I said about Avero before the season started, because this is what his problem was last year. Avero last year, when Shaq went down, when players went down, instead of bringing in guys to play his system that we were excited about as fans because it was dynamic, it was a defense by committee, plug and play. Not a positionless defense or a positionless team like Matt Rule was so keen on, but a different kind of defense. But then when people went down, instead of doing that, he just brought in guys and said, "Okay, you just play your football, and hopefully it'll our systems will mesh." And that doesn't work. So now I think that's what he has to do. Derek Brown's out. That sucks. Yeah. Play your defense still. And make sure you have the guys that are if LeBron Ray is the better defensive tackle to play your system, play him instead of Ashawn Robinson. Yeah. Or if it's Nick Thurman, play him instead, because Nick Thurman was a good defender last year at that time frame.
Don't go based off of just name value.
Yeah, don't go off of just the best available. If it doesn't fit your system, then it's because your system as a defensive coordinator is so different in the way that it rotates, the way that it maneuvers. You don't have true linebackers or defensive ends per se. You have your middle linebackers, but your edge guys and your outside linebackers are fluid.
Yeah.
Your Brown was playing defensive end at one point. Shai Tuttle's playing defensive end. You have the defensive tackles playing defensive end. Yeah. So if that's what you want, then do that. Yeah. And that could maybe affect the team because it doesn't matter who's at quarterback. If you're letting up,
70 points in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to do them. Thank you. If you're letting up 70 points in 2 weeks, it doesn't matter who you're playing. Who you're playing on offense. You're gonna lose every game.
Yeah.
So
and I think too, live by the sword, die by the sword. If that is your sword, if that's your mountain to die on that mountain.
Yeah.
If that's your strength, is putting guys in the right positions to be successful and throwing guys in different positions and giving offenses different looks, then do that.
Yeah.
I don't know why, I think sometimes, we get in this air of being traditional and getting this air of if that's what you do what you do. Yeah. Don't do what everybody else does. And I think sometimes that's the that's the problem. If you have these speed guys who may not be the most polished of rushers, grab a pretty good rusher to spell them out and go from there.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing too. And one of the bigger things with Andy Dalton that I think people shouldn't be surprised if Andy Dalton plays well and, maybe even reels off a win or two. what does Andy Dalton have to lose compared to Bryce Young? Bryce Young has everything to lose. I mean, we're talking about quarterback legacy. We're talking about, you're the number 1 overall pick being a bust.
Yeah.
All of that. That's all on Bryce Young's shoulders. Andy Dalton is 38 years old.
Yeah.
He's been around the league. He's had success in, maybe not in the playoffs, but he's been to the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like, he's led a team. He's been the guy for a team before. He has nothing to lose. There's literally no pressure on him. If he could play just as bad or if not worse than Bryce Young, and the only thing that he's going to lose is maybe a job next year, and he's probably still going to be a backup for somebody.
Oh, absolutely. He's the journeyman backup quarterback and one of probably the best backup quarterbacks in recent history for the NFL. If you look at it, and he's got the precedent for it. He did it in Dallas. He led, I think he was 4-0 in Dallas, backing up Dak Prescott. And you could say what you want. Cooper DeJean did it as well, but that's neither here nor there. But then even in Chicago the year before that, backing up Justin Fields, still came out, won a couple ball games. Like, he's done this before, and I liken it to you think about like 2019 Tennessee Titans. They had a good system around in place. Mariota wasn't really getting the job done, goes out. Ryan Tannehill comes in. Yeah. Ryan Tannehill takes him to the playoffs, AFC Championship the next year. Now, what then you could expect, and this is obviously wishful thinking for for the Panthers fans, if that were the case, if Andy Dalton comes out, goes insane, puts up a great resume, and he gets another year, Bryce Young comes in next year, and there's still that quarterback controversy. If Andy Dalton were to get the starting gig, you're going to see what you've seen across the NFL. Just because that quarterback's good enough to get you there does not mean he's good enough to win it once he gets there. Yeah. And I think that's obviously far ahead future thinking. But don't be surprised if Andy Dalton comes out and wins 3 ball games in a row because he's done this before. He's used to it. Like you said, he's playing he's playing with his heart on his sleeve because he wasn't thinking. He said it yesterday. He didn't think he would ever get the chance to start again. And it was literally.
Why would you?
There's no. And I was surprised that he got re-signed. To be honest, I didn't know, and obviously now it makes sense as to why, but, I think that there's also the thing is, you said what you will about, Dave Canales and what he was supposed to do for Bryce Young. Geno Smith was a veritable backup for his entire time. Comes into Seattle with Dave Canales, gets a huge contract extension playing like vintage West Virginia Geno Smith. Baker Mayfield was dead to rights. And I remember last year talking with my buddies on separate circles, where they were legitimately debating whether or not Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask would get the starting gig. And I'm like, are you insane? It's going to be Baker Mayfield. So Canales comes in, Baker Mayfield, is a starting quarterback and is continuing to be a starting quarterback. So there's a very real possibility that Canales comes in with Andy Dalton, and Andy Dalton looks like vintage Andy Dalton. Now, the thing is, vintage Andy Dalton was, a couple wild card routes to the playoff, in the playoffs, a couple wild card exits. So it's not like, college, like Heisman Baker Mayfield. It's not going to be, power football Geno Smith. You're not going to see that per se, but you could definitely see a renaissance for, the red rifle.
And it's still, even if that's the fix, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, Andy Dalton is the fix. He ain't the fix for long. He's 38.
No, he's not going to be. He's the same draft class as Cam Newton. Yeah. So you can say what you want about, Cam's age, Cam's ability. If you were out there saying Cam shouldn't come back to the Panthers because he wouldn't be, then you should be saying the exact same thing about Andy Dalton. And you don't give me that about, well, Andy's had, and if he hasn't been out of league, he hasn't been doing anything. Yeah. He's been doing the exact same thing that Cam. And don't tell me Cam hasn't been working out on the field. He definitely has been. So you're getting almost the exact same thing. Yep. And so that is again another short-term fix unless you're waiting for, a Cam Ward next year, or a Quinn Ewers or a, Lenore Sellers down the line. Yeah. The solution will be we've shown as a team that you're not going to go for a big quarterback in free agency. That's not going to happen. You're not going to you don't have the money. You're not going to, and maybe Tillis knows it differently. But you got to also remember, Tillis was integral in drafting Patrick Mahomes and evaluating Patrick Mahomes as a player and working out all of those different contracts to keep that team intact. Yeah. So I think that, he will probably go towards the way of going, hey, let's draft a quarterback and a guy that, maybe not everybody's looking at. And see how that – but then in the same sense, I think you have to build a team before you before the quarterback can truly affect change. I think if you look at the Packers, Jordan Love was Jordan. He was written off. Nobody thought he was going to do anything. Mm-hmm. You give him one of the youngest wide receiver cores around, incredibly stable defense. Mm-hmm. He's getting the biggest.
Josh Jacobs into that. Yeah.
He gets the biggest contract in NFL history. You look at, even you look at the Bears, the roster they built for him. You look at the Ravens, the roster they built, they're faltering a little bit. They need to build a bit better of a roster. But, these young quarterbacks, you don't plug the quarterback in first and then build the roster around them. Yeah. And it becomes successful. You look at the Texans. I mean, like you said, 2 back-to-back picks to grab the best arguable quarterback and then the best defender in the draft, and then go down the line and draft the hometown receiver to make your already stacked wide receiver group even better, and then you bring Stephon Diggs into it. Because that was the thing with the Texans. You want to say, it wasn't just C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young. At every single level, they made the better decision. Yeah. They bring in DeMeco Ryans, hometown, veteran, back into your organization. Yep. He does what needs to be done. Yep. You draft Tank Dell, not a pick after. A literal pick after Jonathan Mingo. Mm-hmm. Because C.J. Stroud was saying, hey, and because he was DMing the team after playing in Houston, saying, please, draft me to my city. I want to be here. Then instead of going for Hayden Hurst, they get Dalton Schultz, and you see what happens there. Instead of getting the running backs that, the Panthers got, they got, oh, crap. I can't remember his name now. Singletary. Yeah. They get Singletary, and now they have Joe Mixon. Yeah. And then you look at the defense as well, just every single facet of the game, and Texans did better.
And that's also after having, who was it? They had is it Bernard Pierce or Damian Pierce?
Damian Pierce. Yeah. You're right, Damian Pierce.
He was still, at the time, a young back in the league, still showing he could still be good, but they realized, okay, yes, this guy is good, but we can there's never too much.
That's why you see with, the Colts, they haven't really built anything around him. Taylor, they were flip-flopping the entire time. They lost, their only receiver would probably be a number 2 on most teams. So Anthony Richardson's having to be the entire guy himself, and it's not doing anything. Even Tua, people are writing Tua off, so you go get Tyreek Hill. You draft Jalen Waddle. Yep. You bring in, Raheem. You sign Raheem Mostert. Mm-hmm. You sign, Jalen Ramsey. You sign all these guys to bring.
Haven't seen OBJ yet, but you sign OBJ in the right situation.
I forgot they signed OBJ, to be completely honest.
Think about it.
You're right.
He's not healthy yet, but you think about behind Tyreek Hill, behind Jalen Waddle.
He was effective. He was effective in Baltimore for the time frame he was there. He was effective in LA for the time frame he was there. So that then now Tua's looking, if he can stay healthy, that he was looking like the guy. Yeah. Same with even Tampa Bay. Mm-hmm. Say what you will about Tom Brady, but they still brought in Antonio Brown. They still brought in Rob Gronkowski.
Yeah, they already had Mike Evans.
They draft. They signed Leonard Fournette. They bring in Raheem. I can't remember his name. Rashad White. They on the defensive side of the ball.
And Chris Godwin was already there too.
Their defensive side of the ball was already stacked. Yeah. They bring in a couple more weapons. That's how you. And then even Matt Stafford on the ring. Even for established quarterbacks, you build the team around them. And so that was where that's where Fitterer faltered, and that's going to be the original sin, was then trading away DJ Moore to be able to get Bryce Young and then not pay Brian Burns. Mm-hmm. That in and of itself put the Panthers back 3-5 years.
Yeah, and even the rumor, whether you want to believe it or not, and maybe you don't want to believe it because it sounds even worse, but the fact that you had a chance at 2 first-round picks for Brian Burns.
Oh, they definitely did. They absolutely had that chance.
To miss that too?
They absolutely had that chance, and that's something that is non-existent in the NFL anymore. You don't see anybody getting 2 first-round picks. Mm-hmm. Ernest Jones for the Rams, the Titans got him for nothing. Yeah. The Titans got him for nothing. They, it's ridiculous what you see for the trades nowadays. And then in respect to the contracts that these players are getting, once they're being signed in free agency, they're getting scraps offered for trades, but then they're signing max contracts. And so that's where I think it's not a Bryce Young issue. It is a team development issue. You did better this offseason, I think, and what I saw from Dan Morgan and Damian Lewis, Robert Hunt on the offensive line, bringing in, I think Miles Sanders is going to show that he actually did deserve the contract he's gotten. We're stuck with it regardless. Mm-hmm. And even on the defensive side. And I think this is where Panthers fans also need to be a bit further down the road looking. Mm-hmm. Don't forget, Jonathan Brooks could come back in 2 weeks. Yeah. And then who knows how you're running back room looks. To me, I don't think you need to play him, and I wouldn't play him just because of the injury he's coming off of. Mm-hmm. But they drafted him with the hopes of him being the best running back in that class.
Yeah.
Then, G.J. Watt comes back. And, yes, he wasn't the best guy in Minnesota. He had, Danielle Hunter, obviously, as well. But he was still making impact and could be a plug-and-play guy in this defense. So you've got and then even like a guy like Amari Barno, who was definitely a project player at a defensive end, but they haven't got to see his full impact, and maybe Avero can bring it out of him. So there are still guys on the PUP list that you're hoping come back full throttle.
Yeah.
And then maybe turn your defense around a little bit, give yourself another weapon on the offense, to where you're running like a San Francisco 3-4 horsemen of the apocalypse running back room, and maybe have something to affect you in that regard. So I think there is still some optimism, but it is definitely something to temper your expectations around.
Yeah.
For lack of better words, right. I
know. So do you think the Panthers will beat the Raiders this week?
I don't know. I think it's too quick of a turnaround. You're you're going to have a shortened schedule of having to travel out to Vegas. They'll practice tomorrow. They'll probably do a walkthrough on Thursday. Then I'm assuming they'll travel on Friday, or they're not going to do it the day beforehand. But I think it's too quick. Implementing offensive systems already takes longer. You see that across the NFL. They've said, it's less touchdowns have been scored this season. No, it's just the second week of the season. That's just how it's going to work. And I think that the Raiders have hit a stride. They're hitting their momentum. They're going to be at home, and that's always going to be a bit tougher regardless of what the stadium is like. And then I just think, if I had to give a score prediction, I don't think it's going to be – because it was 25-22 or – was that what it was for the Ravens-Raiders? Yeah. Something to that effect?
25-22. Yeah.
I think it'll be I would say 24-17 loss, I think.
Okay. Which is better. I mean, you feel a little better about that.
It would be more than points than you've scored the last 2 weeks combined, but I think your defense just is still struggling. There's not a lot on their offense that scares me, but I think that is the scary thing, is that there's not one person to focus on, and when there's not one person to focus on, then it can come from anybody. And Zamir White, I think, is dynamic, and I think that they have other weapons as well to affect what they want to do. It just depends on what kind of Gardner Minshew that comes out and plays.
Yeah, that's true, and you still got to defend Devontae Adams, so it's I think too. I was a little surprised that they didn't have Bryce start the first quarter, first half, see how he plays. If he doesn't play well, and then yank him, which is worse?
That, I think.
You think so?
There was fans in the stadium on Sunday. I was at the game on the sideline. There was fans chanting for Andy Dalton throughout, and there was a point in time where I was like, yeah, why would you not put Andy Dalton in right now? You're getting rolled over. Especially that Joey Bosa sack came in the third quarter, and it was brutal, and he was getting up, walking slow. I think it's better to just not even give him the, it's going to be, and this will be different because it's not going to be like last year, where last year, like I said, they said he had an ankle injury, so he wasn't dressed. He'll be dressed this time around.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see, and they're not bringing on any other quarterback, so it's just going to be the two of them out there.
Yeah.
Plummer's still on the, the practice squad. I don't think they're going to dress Plummer. It'll be interesting to see if they do or not, because then say Andy goes down, then Bryce comes in. That's an interesting situation.
Yeah.
But no, I think Andy is in from the start, and I think they lose regardless. I think it would be a higher scoring game, but it'll be interesting to see, because even Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield did not match the skill sets. Their skill sets lean more towards Bryce Young than it did to Andy Dalton. I think the reason why Andy Dalton played well last year in his one game is because that's the quarterback play that Frank Reich played as, and that he knew, his entire time as a coach. That's what he operated with. There's a reason why they brought back-to-back Matt Ryan, Phillip Rivers, into the organization before finally, now he's at the door, Andy Richardson comes in. So I think that might have affected why he played a little bit better. So it'll be interesting to see how Andy Dalton does do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a loss.
Okay. I think, I feel like if they win, it's going to have to be kind of ugly, But I think the lack of running game is my struggle a little bit with playing an ugly game.
Yeah.
I think they're going to look a little better, but I think, kind of like we said before, it's like you're preparing for Andy Dalton, but, who knows what you're preparing for offensively.
Yeah.
So I think that could help. I think that could be the silver lining and how they could win, but we'll definitely see.
Mm-hmm.
So for the rest of the games, Thursday Night Football, we got the Patriots at the Jets.
I'm going to go with the Patriots. I've not seen anything that has impressed me with the Jets thus far. Mm-hmm. Even in a slight win over Tennessee, I still haven't seen anything that really impresses me about them. And I think the Patriots have handled business where they've needed to.
Yeah, they've shocked everybody. I feel like, really. I mean, when you think about it, I don't know if there's a bigger surprise in the league right now than New England Patriots. I think that's the team everybody thought was going to be the number one overall pick, and since it's the number one overall pick, and then they completely changed the game in that regard. But I think the Jets win this game. I think the Patriots come back down to earth. I think it's going to be tough either way. I think the Jets are still kind of in preseason mode almost to a certain degree because, Aaron Rodgers coming back off injury, stuff like that. So, him still trying to figure out how mobile he still is with, coming off that injury too. But I think in a close game, I think they win.
Yeah.
The Giants at the Browns.
I think the Browns get resurgence that they need. I see nothing from the Giants that impresses me as well. It's Daniel Jones, so it's hard to win a game with Daniel Jones. Yeah, the Giants,
it seems like, outside of the dropped game sealer from Saquon last night, other than that, it seems like, the frustration probably in the Giants circle is we paid Daniel Jones, we didn't pay Saquon Barkley.
Yeah.
And we knew what we had in both those guys. And we could have drafted, Young in that regard. But, I think the Browns win this game too. I think in terms of if you're going to win a sloppy game, the Browns are going to be the one to win it. They have the kind of running system. They don't have Nick Chubb yet, but they still, they're still playing well enough to do what they got to do. So I think the Browns win that one too. Can the Eagles bounce back against the Saints who are surging?
No.
The Saints are surging.
In New Orleans too? Absolutely not. I think Dennis Allen has shown that, the coaching tree is fruitful. And the Eagles, I don't know what Sirianni was thinking in those play calls. You had easy opportunities. And I get it, beginning of the game, it's different. But, and we're in such a league now that it's like, all right, score the most that you can as quick as you can. So instead of going for an easy field goal that would have had you the game early on, you go for it on fourth down, don't get it. But then even in the end, I'm like, you don't chalk it up to just one play. Saquon should have caught it. I don't know. But that's also not his skill set. Yes, he can be a dynamic, receiving running back, but that's not why you bring him in. Yeah. So I think the Saints, after what they did to the Cowboys, I think they win that one.
Yeah. Do you feel like are the Saints far better than you expected?
Yes. Yeah. And it makes me feel a little bit better about the loss week one, but not by much.
But for them to put up the points they did against the Cowboys too,
with that defense,
it means they're for real.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. The Saints have always been talented. They've just been they only go as far as the quarterback can go. Derek Carr didn't play well last year. They weren't good.
People forget Derek Carr was an MVP candidate not a few years ago, and if they get him back in that regard, that's scary.
And I think for them not to go away from Derek Carr was good.
Absolutely.
No matter what the media circus was, because a quarterback with confidence is a dangerous thing.
Absolutely.
And we've seen a lot of these quarterbacks, you go back to Baker, you go back to Geno, when the team believes that you are that guy, at least for the time being, it's amazing how much different you can play.
Let him keep working out what he's doing, and then if Spencer Rattler can watch and then continue to improve, then you're going to just go from one to the other.
Yeah, that's true. The Texans at the Vikings.
Wow. That's a toss-up, to be honest. I think maybe you do see the first – I would have said you would have seen the first signs of maybe Darnold coming back to life, but the 49ers have just as good of a defense. Yeah. So that's going to be really interesting. I think C.J. Stroud is hitting his stride, as we saw, with the weapons that they put up. I think that – and how they played the other night, I think that'll be a toss-up game. I think it'll be a shootout.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think the Vikings just continue to do – kind of business as usual, and I think the Vikings shock the Texans here.
Is it in Minnesota?
It is in Minnesota.
Okay. Yeah, because they were in Minnesota for the 49ers game, and that also affected it. So it'll be interesting to see.
So the Broncos at the Buccaneers.
Buccaneers.
Yeah.
It'll be a low scoring game, definitely. But I would say the Buccaneers.
I think so too. I think the Broncos are like finding themselves, but I think like in a weird and now, albeit I'm not in Broncos fan circles, but in a weird turn of events, the Broncos are being patient with their young quarterback.
Which is funny because I'm trying to think if Baker Mayfield and Bo Nix ever played against each other in college.
Oh yeah.
They might have, like, if Bo Nix started as a redshirt freshman or a freshman.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that for as old as Bo Nix is.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about. The Packers at the Titans.
This one is going to be, and I'm sorry, Jeff, for anyone who knows, Jeff is a huge Titans fan, and I think their pass is going to come back to bite him because I think Malik Willis comes in, and I think they win that game.
That's a good
He's going to be coming in with vengeance because they had no reason to trade him, to be honest. Like, you should have known.
They didn't give him a chance.
No, they didn't give him a chance, and now you're seeing the fruits of it start to rot with Levis because 2 weeks in a row now he has made stupid plays that have lost you the games effectively. Yeah. So I think Malik Willis comes back for blood.
Yeah, I agree. I think I hate to say this, Jeff, but I'm cheering for Malik Willis a little bit here, just because he's a Virginia guy. I'm a Virginia guy, so there's that. But I think I kind of want to see him get the revenge a little bit here. It's just I felt like it was kind of unfair how he was treated on the way out, and I wasn't a fan of it, so I think he should get his revenge.
Absolutely.
The Bears at the Colts.
Ooh, well, that'll be another just dogfight. I think the Colts show that they are what they said they were. I mean, they handled the Texans pretty well week one, in that shootout. The Packers, they just kind of lost. Going to Lambeau is always tough. They're going to be at home, bringing the Bears in. And like I said, I do not trust Caleb Williams at all. And I think that if it's between Anthony Richardson and Caleb Williams, I'm taking Anthony Richardson. So I think it'll be a battle of the defenses, definitely. But I think I'll give the Colts a slight advantage.
Okay, I think, I've been on my high horse about Caleb Williams and how he's going to prove everybody wrong, and he's going to be this number 1 overall pick that just like sets the world on fire, and well, he hasn't. So I think against the Colts, I think especially against that defense too, I think it's going to be tough sledding on the road. I'm gonna go Colts. Here too. I think Caleb Williams plays a little better, but he's still only 2 games in. But I think he plays a little better, and we'll see how it goes. But the Chargers at the Steelers. Steelers 2-0.
I have no idea.
Justin Fields, I think he continues to.
It's Mike Tomlin. I mean, it doesn't matter who they have out there, and I will say, watching the Chargers, the Panthers still got 2 turnovers. They did nothing with them, but you saw, to add insult to injury, Dante Jackson week 1 against the Falcons take that pick 6 back and win the game for them. And if you get Justin Herbert on his heels, I think you control that game. And then if you shut down the run as well, their offense was propelled by their run. I mean, they did nothing. They didn't need to do anything, but they did nothing in the second half because they didn't really need to. But J.K. Dobbins was running all over the field, as was Gus Edwards, and then Justin Herbert felt comfortable. If Justin Herbert feels comfortable, he's one of the best around. And so I think if Mike Tomlin plays Mike Tomlin defense, then I think they get that win.
Yeah, he's not gonna be. I don't think Herbert's gonna be comfortable at all in this game. I think it's gonna lead to some mistakes on his end. I think the run's gonna be shut down. I think the Steelers win.
Yeah.
The Dolphins at the Seahawks. I'm gonna go Seahawks. Yeah. On this one. I think not knowing what's up with Tua, I think it might be time for Tua to take his health into consideration.
At this point, I mean, it's like, you go to the doctor and they tell you if you continue to eat 2 hamburgers a week, you're going to take, 6 months off your life every time you do. And I think every time he plays a football game, he's taking 6 months off of his life, like to be in the most serious way possible. So I think that for him, it's not worth it. It really isn't. You've
gotten paid.
You've gotten paid. You've proved.
You've lived your dream. You've done everything. You don't have the championship maybe if that's what you were looking for.
But you got it in college. And so, it is what, I would probably say that Antonio Brown, if he could go backwards, he probably wouldn't be able to understand it either way, but Antonio Brown would probably trade his ring for his mental health, I would say, if he goes back and does it. I mean, Tua, I don't even know if Tua can spell his own last name right now. So, yeah.
Most of us can't. So.
No, and he was the only one who could. So I think Dolphins coming into Seattle without him, no, Seattle's going to run away with that one.
Okay. The Niners at the Rams?
Ooh, I think the Niners, without the Rams without Cooper Kupp or Puka, but then also the 49ers without Debo or without McCaffrey. I think the Niners get the slight advantage in this one because I do think, even without Debo, they still have Ayuk, they still have Kittle. Their defense is still intact. With the Rams, they lost Ernest Jones. That was their defensive captain. And then no Cooper Kupp, no Puka Nacua. Yeah. Kyron Williams and Corum are not going to be able to run on that offense. I think, Jordan Mason was able to put up yards, no matter what they were doing. So I think that the 49ers come away with a win in that one.
Okay. I agree. I think the extensive list of talent that the 49ers have is just too much to, even with injuries, it's just too much to deal with. So I'm going to go with them as well. The Lions at the Cardinals. I think the Cardinals are going to surprise some people in this one.
That's a tough one. I don't know. I think that Dan Campbell defense is going to contain Kyler Murray and the weapons that they have on offense. I think this is the Lions' year. I think that they've continuously progressed forward. I think the Cardinals will give them a run for their money, and I think the Cardinals will definitely scare them a little bit. But in the end, I think the Lions are the more experienced team and the more complete team. Yep. So I'd say Lions.
Okay. I'm going Cardinals on that one. The Ravens at the Cowboys. I think the Ravens finally found their identity this week. I think they have a pretty good track record against the Cowboys, regardless of where the game ends up being. And I think, if they get out of their own way, they'll probably win the game. But that's a John Harbaugh.
I'll give that's another toss-up for me because both teams are looking, for redemption off of, one team lost in crushing fashion, and the other one got just blown out of the water in Jerryland too. So I think that, they're going to be trying to defend their home turf, but the Ravens are going to be trying to say, hey, we are what we say we were. Yep. I'll go 50-50 on that one. I have nothing. Okay.
The Chiefs at the Falcons.
Dude, I don't know because I would have said the Chiefs, but then with the Bengals game, I mean, the refs pretty much gave them that game, and then I didn't think the Falcons would handle the Eagles the way they did last night. Yeah. I think it'll be the Chiefs because it's just the Chiefs. I don't think the Falcons have enough in the tank to do that week in and week out, especially on a shortened schedule as well. Yeah. So I think I'll go with the Chiefs. I think they got punched in the mouth by Cincy, and that'll be enough to wake them back up and go, hey, we need to, I think Travis Kelce goes on a tear because he's done nothing at all this season.
Right. Okay. I think, albeit maybe not in the postseason, maybe not in prime time, which this is, Kirk Cousins may not be the most consistent player in the world, but I think in most other occasions, more than not, he is consistent. And I think because of that, I think he's going to get it clicking, and I think the Falcons are going to win this game, and I think it's going to shock some people. All right, we got 2 Monday Night Football games, which is odd.
Okay.
We got starting out with I hate when they do like a 7:30, 8:15 thing, but whatever. Yeah. 7:30, we got the Jaguars at the Bills.
And Bills will run away with it.
Okay. You think the Jaguars' time is over? They just haven't. Not that their time ever.
I was gonna say I don't think they ever had any time. It's not even. It doesn't even matter. I really don't think it matters even who's on the field. Because even before Tua got injured, they were. Still 3 picks. The Bills just dominated on defense, and James Cook looked every bit like his brother that everyone was expecting. And so I think that the Bills just run away with it. I don't think it matters who they're playing against. So the Jags, it's just unfortunate sacrificial lamb of having to go again, especially with it was Thursday. The time they've had Thursday to Monday now. They've had a huge time to rest and recuperate. So, I think the Bills run away with it.
Okay. I think the Jaguars get the upset.
You like the underdog, but I get it's more fun to root for the underdog.
I don't know what it is, man. I feel like the Bills are not as good as they've looked. I think they've impressed me the first couple weeks, but I think at some point turnovers, at some point the lack of talent that they seem to have in the wide receiver room may be an issue. But I feel like honestly, Shakir has impressed me a lot, and I did not expect as much as I did from him.
No.
I think he's really kind of proven to be almost like a little like X factor almost in the receiver room.
Yeah.
I think, like you said, James Cook has been really good. I think it's taken some pressure off of Josh Allen that I thought a lot more pressure was going to be on Josh Allen.
Yeah, without having Diggs.
Yeah, so I think that helps. I mean, my brain is telling me the Bills, but I'm gonna go with the underdog Jaguars here. In this one. The Commanders at the Bengals.
Ooh, I think while they did lose to the Giants, I do think Jaden Daniels is good in that arena. I do think he is a good fit there, and I think Austin Eckler's also helped out for them. I think they get the win in Cincy. I think Cincy utilized all of their strength to play the way they did against Kansas City. I think I could see the Commanders shocking them.
Yeah, I think the Bengals, for whatever reason, they always tend to start slow.
Yeah,
this is kind of for considering how talented the Bengals are, but there's a lot of drama going on in the
there is
and whatnot. I feel like this is a trap game for them to lose.
It is.
And I think they will at home too. I think for whatever reason, I think they come out flat. I think they just don't play as well as probably they could have, and I still think they're missing Joe Mixon a lot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think Jaden Daniels will want to show that he's not still Joe Burrow's shadow while he was at LSU. I think that he'll be trying to play to the best of his ability, and then if you get it, like they just have a different wide receiver set, and and Terry McLaurin, and like I said, I think their running backs in Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler, I think are a good duo and a good safety valve for the young quarterback. And I do think the way he showed out week 1, I think he will show again. So I'll give him the trap game win.
All right. Well, definitely hope you guys enjoyed the show, Jack. I appreciate you for coming
Absolutely.
by. Always a lot of fun. Got to have you on very, very soon. Hopefully, we'll be in a better position.
Probably not.
Let's just hope. Let's just hope. But anyway, definitely hope you guys enjoy. Remember, the Keep Prowling podcast is on all major podcasting platforms, so be sure to check all of that out. But we'll see you guys on the next episode of Keep Prowling Podcast.